everyone. My name is Jorge Viveros. I'm one of the co-founders here at Acquire Weekly, and we're starting off our first 8-part series that we put together about anyone who's seriously thinking about buying a business. Now, over the next 8 sessions, we're going to walk through the entire arc of acquiring a business, from the mindset all the way to closing the table, or the tab, I like to say. But today, before we touch listings, before we touch financing, before we touch anything tactical, we're starting somewhere very simple, somewhere where most people, or like to say, it's the first step that most people skip entirely. And we're starting with why. Like, why are you doing this? Why do people buy businesses? Not the answer they give to their friends, to their family, to their loved ones, at dinner parties, wherever they might go. The real answer to why. Because if you don't know your own answer to that question, everything that comes after it, the searching, the negotiating, the due diligence, gets a lot harder than it needs to be. So here's something I've noticed, and I think everyone else has noticed, is that you always hear people say, I want to buy a business. And I hear this about 30 times a week. I hear this from investors, operators, executives leaving corporate roles, people who just sold something and are sitting on capital. And the sentence comes out very clean, but almost no one finishes it. If you ask them, why do they want a business? Usually the answer gets pretty fuzzy very quickly. They'll say, oh, it's because this business has amazing cash flow, or, oh, this will give me financial freedom. Or one of the most common ones that we hear are, I'm tired of working for someone else. Now, those are all real answers, but they're very surface level answers. So underneath every acquisition, there's actually a real driver. And in my experience, watching hundreds of buyers go through the exact same process, that driver usually falls into one of 4 categories. And today, we're going to walk you through all 4, because the one that actually is the one driving you will help shape every decision you make from here on out. And why does this matter, right? Why should you even put it into your mind? Like, why are we spending the first session on something this introspective? Because I've watched buyers do 3 things when they don't have clarity on their own motivation. And I like to say, these 3 things are reasons to why they're buying the business in the first place, right? 1, they buy the wrong business. They go after a deal that looks good on a spreadsheet, but doesn't actually serve the life they're looking to build. And then 2 years later, they're miserable and they no longer want to be a part of that business. 2, they overpay for the right business. Why do they do that? Because they're so emotionally invested in doing the deal that they lose the vision. They lose the negotiating discipline. Don't overpay. You see this time and time again at a smaller scale. And what do I mean by that? Have you ever been car shopping? I don't have to bring it up, but you guys get the point. Some of you are really negotiators, but some of you feed into that emotion of, I need to have this car. I'm going to pay whatever price they tell me to pay. So they want it more than they want it on good terms. And that usually gets you in a sticky situation. Don't overpay for something that's not at the right price. Now, number 3, and this is the most common, they walk away from a deal they should have done because they couldn't articulate to even themselves why this deal mattered. So when due diligence got hard, they bailed out. And I've seen this time and time again. You get stricken, you get heartstruck by the deal itself. And in your head, you're not emotionally okay, because I've seen buyers go into a mindset of, I didn't get to close it on my first chance. I submitted the LOI, submitted another LOI. I'm losing the deal, or due diligence getting too hard. I don't understand the numbers. I can't make any sense of it. And then you lose the focus that you should have had at the beginning. And then you bail on something because you've been hit so many times, right? So getting back into it, They never got clear on their why before they started. So I'm here to fix that. So let's get started. Here are the four reasons we found to why people buy businesses. Every buyer I've worked with maps into one of these, or sometimes maybe two, but there's almost always a dominant one. Number one, income replacement. You want the business to pay you, right? Whether that's cash flow, owner's draw, or distributions. You want it to replace a salary that you have or to beat one, which is okay. And number two, wealth building. You're not trying to replace your income. You already have one. You're buying the business as an asset to grow it, to hold it, or to eventually sell it, or use it as a vehicle for long-term equity creation, which is very smart. Or number three, a strategic bolt-on. You already own a business. You're acquiring something to plug it into or into what you already have, and you're looking for expansion, whether that's a new customer base, to expand geographically, to expand the business's current capabilities, or to expand your team. So the acquisition is a move, not a destination. And finally, number four, this is one nobody talks about, but it's the identity and the operator's itch. You want to run something, you want to be the person whose name is on the door, and then the financial returns matter, but they're not the only thing pulling you forward. I want you to listen to all four, notice which one you nod at, and that nod is just a confirmation. It's information you need to keep. So right here, I'd like us to do a quick pause. The reason we're going to do that is because I want you to actually do something with me. I just listed four motivations to why people buy businesses. Which one made you nod? Not the one you think you should nod at, not the one that sounds the most respectable when you're talking to friends, family, or at a dinner party or wherever that place might be that you're going to chat about this. The one that actually made you nod. Take 10 seconds. I'll wait. We'll pause. We don't have to take the full 10 seconds, but for a dramatic pause, we'll hold on to that. So whatever just came up for you, that's a data point. And we're going to come back to that exact same data point. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go through each motivation in depth because they carry their own opportunities and their own traps. So the first motivation, income replacement, right? This is the most common driver I see, especially with first-time buyers. You've worked a corporate job, or you're an executive, or you're a high earner who's gotten tired of trading hours for a paycheck. And you've done the math. If you buy a business doing $500,000 a year in seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE, you can replace your income and own the asset. That's the healthy version of this motivation, right? You're calm about it. You've run the numbers. You know what you need the business to throw off, and you're willing to be patient until you find the right one that does. Now, here's the dangerous version. The dangerous version is when you're desperate. You've already left a job, or you're about to, and you need the business to start paying you yesterday. And when that's the energy you bring into a deal, you'll make compromises. You'll buy something with thinner margins than you should. You'll accept seller financing terms that don't actually work. You'll skip due diligence because you can't afford to walk away. So here's the question to ask yourself. If this deal takes another 12 months to find, can I still wait? If the answer is yes, you're in a healthy mindset, you're in a healthy place. If the answer is no, you need to slow down. Patience is virtue. You need to fix your financial runway before you fix anything else. Now, motivation number two, wealth building. This is the buyer who already has income figured out. Maybe they're a doctor, a lawyer, a senior executive, or they've already exited a business. They're not buying the business to live off of it. They're buying it as a vehicle to grow it, professionalize it, hold it for 10 to maybe 5 years, and then either keep the cash flow or sell it for a multiple. Now, here's the healthy way of taking that approach. You're patient. You understand that wealth building takes time. You're willing to keep the operators in place, or you might even hire a CEO. You're optimizing for return on invested capital and not return on emotional energy. That's the way you should be looking at it. But here's the dangerous way that most people look at it. You treat acquisitions like the stock market. You start chasing returns instead of buying a real, durable business. You buy three at once because you saw someone on Twitter do it, you saw someone on LinkedIn do it. You might have seen people on ads that might be running on your Instagram account, your Facebook account, whatever it might be, telling you, I bought three businesses, I'm a multimillionaire now. And that's when it gets scary. You're underestimating how much operational attention even a turnkey business requires. So the question you should be asking yourself is, am I prepared to be involved at the board level for the next 5 years? Even if I never want to run this business day to day. And that's a very important question to ask yourself, because wealth building buyers who are completely absent post close, they're the ones who end up with the businesses that decay quietly over time while they're not looking. So, what is motivation number 3? Strategic bolt-on. This is the business, this is the buyer who already owns one or more businesses. They're not entering the market, they're expanding inside their own market. So you're acquiring something because it gives you a customer base you don't have, or geographically a reach you didn't have before, or a capability that will take you 3 years to build organically, you can now hone in and acquire like that. Now, the healthy way of thinking about this is you have a clear thesis, you know exactly why this business fits your current business or your current platform, and you can articulate the integration plan in one sentence. I'm building this business because it's going to do X, which is going to equal Y. You're not buying revenue, you're buying a piece that makes your existing platform more valuable. Now, here's the dangerous version of how to look at it. You're acquiring to look busy, or you chase top line revenue growth that doesn't actually compound into anything, or you're buying companies because you're addicted to the deal making process rather than the operating side of things, which I will say I haven't seen that often when it comes to individuals who already own businesses. I do see that quite often in private equity and family offices. Just addiction of just buying without there being a strategy involved, without there being an integration involved, without there being a real operator to be able to manage all of those things. Now, question you need to ask yourself, what does my company look like in 24 months with this acquisition versus without the acquisition, right? If you can't draw that picture in detail, including which roles need to get consolidated, which systems need to get merged, and then which customers get cross-sold, you're not ready to acquire yet, sadly. Now, here's motivation number 4. This is one that no one really likes to talk about, right? The identity and the operator's itch. Some buyers usually fit within this, and it's more common in the industry than most people like to admit, because most people want to buy a business because they want to be the owner. They want to walk into the building. They want to, or let's say they want to walk into the building that has their name on it. They want their name on the email signature that says blah, blah, blah is the owner or president or co-founder. They want to be the person who built something or bought something or runs something, right? It's all imagery. But here's the healthy way of looking at it. You have to be honest about it. You can acknowledge the part of your motivation being an identity. That's completely fine. But you also have to do the financial work to make sure that whatever deal you go into, the deal is sound. You don't let the dream of being the owner override the math. Now, the dangerous version of that approach is you overpay because you've already imagined yourself in the office or owning it, and you fall in love with a specific listing, whether that's a brewery, a marina, a coffee chain, HVAC company, something with vibes, we'll just say, right? and you find yourself making the numbers work backwards from the dream in your head. And this is where the worst deals get done every single time. So the real question you should ask yourself is, if the exact same business was in a different industry, would I still want to buy it? It means identity in, sorry, let's circle back. If the answer is no, that's important information. It means that the identity is doing more of the driving than the economics. That doesn't disqualify the deal, but it makes you slower and not faster. And if the answer is yes, you should be questioning yourself, because you don't want to just buy anything willy-nilly. Now, okay, coming back to what I asked you earlier, which one was it? There's no real answer here, but there is a wrong question, which is asking which one should be your motivation. So the wrong question to ask yourself right now is, which one should be my motivation? The answer is whichever one is actually pulling you to acquiring a business. Pretending it's a different one doesn't change the gravity. It just makes you less prepared. Most buyers I work with have one dominant motivation and one secondary. Income with a side identity, wealth with a side of bolt-on, and that's normal. Those are examples. What matters is knowing the dominant one, because that's the one that's going to make decisions for you when you're tired, when the deal is dragging, when you're 3 months in and you have to choose whether to push forward or to walk away. Here's where it gets interesting, I'd like to say. And honestly, where most buyers get themselves into trouble. Your motivations don't always agree with each other. The most common combination I see is income plus identity. The buyer needs the business to pay them, and they want it to be a business they're proud to own. That sounds reasonable, but watch what happens. And trust me, watch. They're looking at a perfectly fine, and here's an example, right? Let's say you're looking at an industrial cleaning business that's doing 600K in SD, the exact same cash flow you need. But you keep dragging your feet because you're like, it's industrial cleaning. It's not so glamorous. I don't want to tell people I own industrial cleaning company. It doesn't make for a great story. It doesn't make for a great conversation. Meanwhile, let me give you an example. You pull a craft coffee roasting company, and it's doing around 200,000 SD, way under what you need to live on, and it barely scratches your identity. You're like, you know what? I'd be proud to tell people I own I like to say a bougie coffee roasting company. And the two motivations are fighting each other. It's like, on one hand, you can buy the industrial cleaning company that's doing 600,000 that covers all the bases for you, but you're not really proud of saying that you own an industrial cleaning business because it's not too fancy. But on the other hand, you can say, hey, I own a fancy coffee roasting company and it does 200K, but I'm barely floating or barely sticking to being alive. And most buyers don't notice that, right? And the same thing happens with the wealth plus bolt-on. So the buyer says they're buying wealth and they keep making impulsive acquisitions because they have an existing business and they keep seeing opportunities. So they end up with 5 mediocre companies instead of one great one. If you have a dominant motivation and a secondary motivation, write them both down. And then write down honestly what they would tell you to do if they were in a fight. Because they will fight. Trust me. I used to be the person I wanted to become a co-founder, want to become a CEO. And my identity was I wanted to operate something great. But at the same time, I also wanted to own something great. And the ego plus the driver were falling in. And until you get disciplined enough, you'll choose the latter. And that's how mistakes are made. So I want you to actually do this. Pause the video. We'll take a quick pause here. And I'm saying pause the video because normally these webinars are recorded. I want you guys to take a quick pause. I want you to write down 3 simple things. Not in your head. Don't keep it in your head. On a piece of paper or a note on your phone or your tablet, whatever you might use to, put notes on. I'm old fashioned. I like to say I like to keep it in a journal and I write it down somewhere you can, come back to anytime you're either tired, stressed, or need a pick me up or need to understand what's driving you. So first question, what's your dominant motivation? The one you nodded at earlier, right? The one that's like, this is why I want to buy a business. All right. So your first question should be, what's your dominant motivation? Now answer the second question. What's your secondary motivation? The one in second place. And here's your third question to answer. When they conflict, which one do you want to win? The third answer is the most important one. Because the moment you decide that in advance, before you're looking at any specific deal, you've given yourself a decision-making framework. And when you're emotionally invested in a listing, you're going to need that framework. Trust me on this. That's why we're doing this as practice. So again, first question to answer, what's your dominant motivation? Second question to answer, what's your secondary motivation? And lastly, when they both conflict, which one do you want to win the most? So I want to give you a real example because sometimes we can chit chat, but life is learned through examples, right? Not just theory. So because I think this lesson lands harder with a story than with theory, let me give you one. A few years back, I was working with a buyer. Let's call him David. David's in his mid-40s. He sold his tech consulting firm, and he was sitting on around $3 million in capital looking for his next move. He told me his motivation was wealth building, which I understand. I mean, when you're sitting with $3 million in capital, you want to build on that capital. So he wanted an asset he could professionalize, hold for 10 years, maybe 5 years, and then exit. Perfect. Great. Clear motivation, clear plan. And then 6 weeks into his search, he sends me a listing. A craft brewery in a touristy town. Mistake number 1. So 800,000 in revenue, about 90,000 SDE. The numbers, to be quite polite, to be quite honest, not what we were looking for. And the asking price was 1.4 million. It didn't make sense to me. So I asked David, this isn't a wealth building deal. This is more of like a lifestyle deal. So what's going on? Like, what are we trying to do? And I remember on that phone call, he paused and he was honest with me. He's like, I've always wanted to own a brewery. And that's where the second identity or the second motivation was coming in, right? His identity was talking, not the wealth building side of why we were helping him with the acquisition. So in his case, the 2 motivations that had been fighting for 6 weeks without him noticing were those 2, wealth building and the identity. So here's what happened next, right? So I want you to remember the same exact, I like to say, practice we did in the previous slide. I wanted him to identify the driving force or the motivation into why he was going to acquire a business, why he was doing what he was doing. And when he did that, he acknowledged that the identity was part of his motivation. And then he made his choice. So he decided the wealth building motivation had to win, right? Because he had 3 kids approaching college and a family that depended on that capital growing, not getting tied down or tied up in a passion project. He passed on the brewery. Thank God. Praise praise the Lord. And 6 months later, he acquired a regional commercial HVAC business doing 1.2 million in SDE. Today, it's worth about 3 times what he paid. He still drinks craft beer. He loves craft beer, but he doesn't own the brewery. That's the value of knowing your motivation in advance. And I've had multiple buyers do the same thing. A hobby is just a hobby. It doesn't mean it's going to be something you're going to want to dive deep into. I love cars, but you can see today I'm not a mechanic. Would I like to learn one day? Sure. But I'm not going to open it up, uh, you know, automotive shop anytime soon. So before we close today, I want to name a few motivations that are not on the list of 4, and that's deliberate because these come up and they need to be called out. So one of them, so reason 1, because someone on the internet said I should. And I see this time and time again. I think I see this more often not today, to be quite honest. Someone on the internet is going, you should buy an HVAC company. You should buy a roofing company. Why are you buying those companies if you have no idea how to run them? Secondly, especially if you don't have a license to operate them. Don't make that mistake. Just because someone's doing something doesn't mean you're going to do it at the same level they can. No disrespect, right? And I feel like acquisitions have become part of like a content category in the last few years. And I'm seeing this all over the internet, whether it's on Twitter, podcasts, YouTube. There's an entire ecosystem of people telling you what to buy, what kind of businesses to buy, what the cheat code to life is, and that's buying a business. Some of that content's very good. A lot of it is people who've never closed a real deal, who are selling courses to people who never will. If your motivation tracks back to a piece of content you watch, I request that you slow down. Watching is not wanting. Remember that. Watching is not wanting. And not all information is good information. Overanalysis leads to paralysis, people. And reason number 2 that I see time and time again. I'm buying a business because I hate my job. It's more common than not, right? I want to be careful here because sometimes it leads to a legitimate motivation. If you hate your job because you want autonomy and ownership, that's a real thing. That's a real feeling. I can't stop you from doing that. But if you hate your job because you're burnt out, buying a business is going to make it dramatically worse before it gets better. Trust me. You'll have to put in a lot more work than you would have at your job. You don't fix burnout by adding more responsibility. You fix it first, then you make a decision, then you go acquire. And finally, reason number 3 is because you want to prove something, right? I want to prove something. I want to prove something to either a parent, an ex, a former boss, to yourself. And I'll just say this very gently. A business is a really expensive way to prove a point. And if you're trying to prove a point, and if proving a point is something that's part of you, then I highly recommend assessing yourself and addressing it. Because I don't want you to make a financial mistake just because you're trying to prove a point. What point are you trying to prove? You can do that in so many other things. And those things are most likely free. Trust me. Now, here's a test I want you to leave with you today, right? It's deceptively super simple, but most buyers struggle with it the first time. I want you to finish these sentences. I want to buy a business because blank so that I can blank. The first blank is the motivation. The second blank is the outcome. And I'll give you an example. I want to buy a business because I want to replace my $250,000 a year corporate salary so that I can stop trading my time for a paycheck and own the asset I'm building. The sentence is super clear and it gets you ready to start your search. And it keeps you in the mindset of, that's a buyer who's ready to start searching. I want to buy a business because I want to do something different so that I can feel more fulfilled. That's not a clear sentence. That's someone who needs more time to think. And that's okay. And I want you to, I'd say, let me repeat it so it stays in your head. I want to buy a business because I want to do something different so that I feel more fulfilled. Remember, that's not a clear sentence. There's no objective, right? The first example has a clear motivation and a clear outcome. Remember, the motivation has to provide you with something to execute. Keep that top of mind. So when you can finish this sentence and it sounds specific, not vague, then you're ready to move to the second stage. But until then, just sit with it. And a quick note before we do Q&A, and again, this is a recorded webinar. I'm going to do this in every webinar. It's not a pitch, but just to be transparent where I'm coming from. Let's talk about Acquire Weekly. Now, Acquire Weekly is a private deal network and advisory platform. We work with buyers across the US and Canada, looking at businesses doing between $2.5 million and $250 million in revenue. And we have over, I won't say how many subscribers, but there's too many of you guys where we're having to reply on a day-to-day basis. And we apologize that we can't reach every one of you on email. Trust me, our team is working hard to reply to those emails. But when you get 500 to 1,000 email replies every email send, it gets pretty hectic. But notice what I didn't do today. I didn't try to convince you to buy a business. I didn't try to convince you to come join Acquire Weekly. I didn't tell you that the time was now or that you're missing out on anything or that you need to act now. That's not what we do here at Acquire Weekly. What we do is we make sure that once you figured out your own motivation, once you can finish that sentence I just gave you, keep that in mind, there are real opportunities waiting that match what you actually need. Not someone else's idea of what a good deal looks like. It's your idea of what a deal should be like. So today's job was to figure out your why. The rest of the series is about making sure that that why has a clear path. And a quick recap, 4 things to take with you. 1, there are 4 real motivations behind every acquisition: income replacement, wealth building, strategic bolt-on, and identity. 2, every one of them has a healthy version and every one of them has a not so healthy version. Knowing which version you're operating from is half the battle, right? 3, most buyers have a dominant motivation and a secondary one. Decide in advance which one wins when they conflict. And 4, the 1 sentence test. If you can't finish it specifically, you're not ready to make offers yet. And that's not a failure. That's just important information about the reasoning to why you're looking to buy a business. Okay? Now, what are we going to do in webinar 2? In webinar 2, we're going to, or I like to say, we're going to shift, I pronounce it incorrectly. English is my second language. We're going to shift from the internal question, why do you want to buy a business, to the external one. Why is right now actually the moment to do it? These are real, specific reasons that the current market window matters, right? Demographics, pricing, capital availability. Most buyers don't see them clearly because nobody walks them through it. So I'm going to walk you through each and every one of them. So I'll see you in the next webinar, and please make sure to sign up. But before we wrap things up, I want to answer a few questions that you guys have been running through. Feel free to answer in the chat. I'll reply to them, and these are the real ones I hear over and over again. So please, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat right now. I'd be so grateful to listen to what you guys have to say. And then lastly, thank you for being here. Sit with the one sentence test, write down your answers, bring it with you to webinar number 2, and I'll see you in the next one. And until then, feel free to continue to place your questions in the chat. Take care, guys, and thank you again for joining me today. Okay, time to answer some questions.